You know that feeling, right? When you try to force a change in yourself, in your team, and it just backfires? We're always told to just push harder, right? Apply more effort. But what if the most powerful way to change course has nothing to do with pushing at all? Today, we're going to dig into this really cool idea that connects quantum physics to our actual lives, making change happen through potentials, not pushes. Okay, so let's just start with the most basic question imaginable. How do you actually make something change its path? And I mean anything. A person, an organization, heck, even a tiny particle. What does it really take to shift its trajectory? Well, the obvious answer, the one we all jump to, is force. You just push it. You apply more energy, you add more torque. It's direct, it's simple, and it's how we think the world works.
But here's where things get really interesting. What if the most profound, the most lasting changes don't come from that kind of brute force? What if they just emerge from a place of guidance, of pure potential, without any direct push whatsoever? It's a bit of a mind bender, so let's explore it.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to start in a kind of strange place, with a genuine puzzle from the world of physics. And I want to be clear, this isn't just a thought experiment. This is a real, measurable phenomenon that makes you question everything you thought you knew about cause and effect.
Okay, check this out. It's called the Bohm effect. Picture a particle behaving like a wave, and it splits to go around a magnetic field that is perfectly shielded. And here is the absolute key. The particle never enters the field. No force from that field ever touches it. And yet, when the two paths of that particle come back together on the other side, its final pattern is changed. It's as if the particle somehow knew about the field it never came into contact with. Wild, right?
And that experiment reveals the core idea for us today. It shows us, in the real world, that guidance is not the same thing as pushing. The potential for a field to exist can literally shape an outcome, even when the force of that field is completely walled off. This idea is going to be our anchor for everything else we talk about. So, if this bizarre thing can happen at the quantum level, you have to wonder, where else is it happening? Let's take this strange idea out of the physics lab and use it as a lens to look at our own world. What does guidance without a push actually look like for us?
Well, this brings us to a concept from the physicist David Bohm called active information. He had this brilliant idea that information isn't always just passive stuff, like words on a page. He said sometimes information actively organizes reality. It's not about the energy or the volume of the information, but its form, its meaning, it guides, it doesn't shove.
And when you see these two ways of thinking side by side, the difference is just stark. On one hand, you've got force-based change. Push harder, get a result. Think of a boss yelling, "Work faster." It's direct. But on the other hand, you have potential-based change. This is way more subtle. It's about changing the conditions around the system, like shifting the team's mission or the meaning of a project, and then just watching as its path naturally changes on its own.
Okay, so we're juggling some pretty big ideas here. To explore all this without getting totally lost, we need a map. So we're going to use a simple framework with 3 different registers, or you could think of them as domains, where we can spot this pattern of potential without push popping up.
And hey, before we go any further, this is super important. Let's be really clear. We are exploring similarities in form. That's what isomorphism means. We are not saying your mind is a quantum field or anything like that. No quantum woo here. We are just using a powerful analogy from physics to shine a light on patterns we see in our own lives. It's all about mapping similar structures, not claiming they're the exact same thing. So here's our map for the journey. We started in the physical register with that physics experiment we just talked about. Next, we're going to jump to the phenomenological, which is just a fancy word for our own personal lived experience. You know, how stories and meaning guide us. And finally, we'll land in the practical register, looking at how all this applies to making real change happen for ourselves and in our jobs.
All right, let's dive into that second register, our lived experience. How does this idea of a guiding potential actually show up in our day-to-day? Well, it turns out it has everything to do with the stories we tell ourselves.
There's this incredible metaphor for this called narrative tensegrity. You know those cool sculptures made of sticks and wires that seem to float? That's tensegrity. They hold their shape through a perfect balance of tension and compression. In the exact same way, a good, coherent story acts like a tensional force in our lives. It pulls together all the random, messy data points, our memories, our actions, our beliefs, into a stable structure that can actually bear weight. The story literally gives our life its shape. And this is why it's such a powerful idea, because it perfectly explains what happens when our personal story breaks. When we lose that sense of meaning, when the narrative doesn't hold up anymore, the whole structure can just collapse. That invisible potential field that was holding everything together just vanishes, and we're left feeling lost. The story was the potential.
Okay, now let's get really practical. Let's move to our third and final register and talk about why change is so ridiculously hard sometimes, even when we desperately want it. And guess what? There's another great metaphor from physics for this too.
Let's talk about angular momentum. You've seen this in action with a spinning top or a gyroscope. When something is spinning, it becomes incredibly stable, and it actively resists any attempt to change its orientation. It literally fights back against being pushed off course. And this is just a brilliant metaphor for our own identity, isn't it? Our habits, our beliefs, our whole personality. It's like a gyroscope spinning at thousands of RPM. It has momentum. So when you say, that's it, I'm just going to decide to change, that's like you trying to grab that spinning wheel with your bare hands and wrench it in a new direction. And what happens? You get a lot of wobble, a lot of resistance, but you almost never get a clean, stable change of direction. You're using force against momentum, and momentum usually wins. So, how do you change direction without all that resistance? You don't grab the gyroscope. Instead, you create what you could call a superconducting container. It's an environment with basically zero resistance to change. And what does that look like? It means creating real psychological safety, being totally transparent, making sure everyone has shared stakes, and lowering friction between people. In a container like that, the gyroscope of our identity can safely slow down, reorient itself without a big fight, and then spin back up in a whole new, stable direction.
So let's just zoom out for a second. What have we done here? We've taken a journey from a strange quantum physics experiment all the way to a practical model for personal and organizational change, and the whole thing is held together by this one single repeating pattern.
Now, of course, it's always important to be honest about where an analogy has its limits. A physical potential is a precise mathematical thing, our personal stories are messy and always up for debate. And yeah, the gyroscope is a powerful metaphor for resistance. It's not a literal diagram of how your brain works. But you know what? Acknowledging these limits actually makes the tool stronger, not weaker. So we'll leave you with a final question to chew on. Instead of always looking for the forces that are pushing you around, what if you started looking for the potentials that are guiding you? The unspoken stories in your family, the invisible culture at your job, the deep-seated beliefs you hold. Where in your world are the invisible potentials that are quietly shaping your path right now?